In the Gun, episode 184, it's time to break down that tough loss to the Penn State Nittany Lions, home opener in the books. What went wrong and where do we go from here? We'll discuss all of that and more on this edition of ITG.
Let's go!
You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Go single! Thomas nuts!
ITG.
With Wes, Owen, and Jed.
Those goofy bastards are just about the best thing I've got going.
Here's our mission statement in the Gun podcast.
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing.
You're only young once, but you can be immature forever.
Let's have something to do.
It's a long story.
Dude, it's all PG, you know what I mean? Everybody had their clothes on and everything.
Okay, it's a short story.
They dropped some balls on the Oklahoma State side. Quit laughing. Okay, look at it. Here we go.
Hey.
You are in the Gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 184 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Euler, and I've got the best teammates in the business. Today, it's myself and the signal caller, Jed Drenning. And as always, this episode of In the Gun is brought to you in part by our friends at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Every stat, every matchup, live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. It's all on Bet Online. You think you know your stuff? You got to get in on their $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. And when the games are over, you can head to their online casino and get in on games of blackjack, poker, or one of over 150 slot games. So head to the website today to get in on the action at Bet Online. The game starts here. And of course, Jed, plenty to get into as it relates to our game, the loss to the Penn State Nittany Lions on a big noon kickoff this past Saturday. We'll get into some specifics on the other side after we take our first break, but just kind of opening statement, opening thoughts here to get us going.
Ugh. That's my first word, ugh. It's
you said ugh. I thought you said sounded like a 4-letter word at first. It was ugh, folks. UGH.
Ugh. Ugh. Yeah, Skylar, you better fix that.
I said, I think that's the first time Jed's ever cursed on here.
No, I feel like it. But frustrating on so many levels, as we all know. I mean, this isn't a Penn State team that was overrated by any means. I kind of walked out of that thinking maybe they're a little underrated. I think Andy Kotelnicki, on the long term, might have saved James Franklin's job. If James Franklin is going to be judged on winning or losing big games, I think he might win a couple of those with Andy Kotelnicki. I really do. I think their schedule sets up favorably. I think they're certainly a playoff team. They might be a Big Ten champion playoff team. Let's see. They get the Buckeyes in Happy Valley. Their next road game is not till October against USC. Interesting how this sets up. But what makes this so frustrating is Penn State was all we thought and probably a little more, and you still get the sense they were there for the taking. If we had just played a decent brand of football, I don't even think it took an exceptional brand of football, because we were both on edge. Both teams coming out of the gates had to shake off the nerves. That was apparent with both Penn State and West Virginia. I think the environment was there to take advantage of, at least in the first half, till Mother Nature intervened. That was one of the most electric environments I've ever seen at Mountaineer Field. I mean, that run-on, that's what run-ons at Mountaineer Field are supposed to be. That coin toss in the middle of the field, here on both sides, that's what it's supposed to be. So, again, for the first 30 minutes of football, before that storm set in and those delays kicked in, that was Mountaineer Field at its absolute zesty best. And I think in large measure because of that, if we had played a decent brand of football, this incredibly talented and highly rated for a reason Penn State team was there for the taking. And it looked, even as we were kind of trudging our way through a very disjointed first quarter, it still felt like we might shake it off before they do and find a way. And I mean, Wes, after the first quarter, it was scoreless. We'd run 19 plays to their 10. We'd held the ball for 10 minutes of the first quarter, and we had, here's the key point, gained 51 yards rushing. We'll get into some of what we lost, And that was part of the problem, rushing when we get back from the break. But yeah, it just felt like we didn't show up to play great football. It was almost like the moment was too large for us, and maybe all the buildup was too much for us. And this was a battle-tested team. But one of the things I said in the post game, Neil's scrambling to find out why veteran players performed this way in this setting. And the only thing that I can come up with is the one thing this group hasn't been asked to do, this group of 2024 Mountaineers. We're coming off what was regarded as a season of overachievement. We won 9 games, we only dropped 4. We were on the fringe of being ranked at the end of a season where we were picked to finish 14th, dead last in the Big 12. So we exceeded all expectations wildly and almost even challenged for a league title down the stretch, or at least a chance to push for Jerry World. None of those things fell into play. But in other words, by most reasonable expectations, 2023 was considered, if not a success, then certainly a building block towards something more. And so there was a bit of buzz because of what West Virginia had done, finished strong down the stretch in 23 coming into this. But the one thing this team has not been asked to do is handle prosperity. And if you want to regard that 9-4 season as a prosperous season on any level, well, right out of the gates, you're asking this team to handle that prosperity of that 9-4 season, and they didn't answer the bell. They did not handle that well at all. Again, it's not like Penn State played a game for the time capsule. They were far from perfect.
No doubt.
They gave us more than our share of opportunities, but we just did not play a good enough brand of football to beat a lot of teams. Certainly, an exceptional team like Penn State, and when you look at this, Penn State's hardly the barometer of success for West Virginia. We beat them 9 times in 60 tries, right? I mean, our standard bearer as a Hall of Fame head coach, Don Nehlen, is 2-11 against them all time. And one of his 2 wins was one of his best teams against Joe Paterno's worst team. So it's not as if this is by the standard by which we judge success historically at West Virginia. So you can rebound from this, and you can to go on to have a very successful and fruitful season, but not playing the way you did, unless you shore up some of the issues we'll talk about, none of that's going to happen.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think everything you said there was spot on, particularly, felt like there were opportunities that it was a team that was there for the taking. It was a team that was knocking off some cobwebs themselves in Penn State. I mean, 4 drives inside their 30-yard line in the first half, and you come away with 6 points. That's not how you beat a better team. That's not how you win as an underdog. You have to be buttoned up. You have to take advantage of those opportunities, and we did just the opposite. And Jed, in the aftermath now, it's been about a little over 48 hours since the game ended now that you and I are recording this. I think you touched on this as well, too. Like Penn State, that's a team, that's a program, that's a roster, that's a coaching staff right now that is ready for the big time. And we can make jokes about how all they do is lose to Ohio State, all they do is lose to Michigan, all they do is lose big games. Well, you know what? You got to be in position to play big games to lose them. And they're in position to play big. We haven't played a game like that since 2018 when Kyler Murray and Oklahoma rolled into town against Will Grier and the boys. Like, make no mistake, that's the last time we played in a game that was that hyped, that big from a national perspective. Penn State plays in 2 or 3 of those every single year. They've been looking at this recruiting class for the last 3 years. This is their group. This is their time. They are ready for the big time. They are ready for those moments, and they didn't blink, and it showed. And, again, I know we all like to make the jokes about how they're going to lose to Ohio State. They're going to lose to Michigan. You know what? Maybe they won't this year because maybe they are finally ready for the big time, and we just weren't. And that doesn't mean that that's going to be the case in perpetuity. That doesn't mean that that's going to be the case for the rest of the season. That's not an indictment on the remaining 11 games, and that's not an indictment on this group after 60 minutes. But on Saturday, August 31st, Penn State was ready for the big time, and we were not. Both teams were going to make mistakes and errors. That always happens in the first game of the season. You see that across college football, but we blinked first. Penn State was able to shrug it off and keep moving ahead first. And so that's kind of just, what I've been thinking about for the last 48 hours. That's a program and a team that is ready for that moment. And we just aren't quite there yet. Again, that doesn't mean we can't get there this season. That doesn't mean in perpetuity, anything like that. It just means right now. But you know what? I joked with you about this before we started recording. For those that are watching on YouTube, you can see it. If you're just listening, I'm wearing my my Geno Smith Seattle Seahawks. They wrote me off. I ain't right back though T-shirt. Because having said all of that, again, this same thing happened last year, and you went 9-3 from that point of losing to Penn State in week 1. Everything is still in front of you. The opportunity to play better football is still in front of you. And if you do that, you're going to have some more of these opportunities in the big time, and you're going to be able to take advantage and put yourself in a better situation. So it's frustrating, and again, I think it's probably nice that you and I have had some time to cool off a little bit and things like that before we get into this. But it's a real opportunity. It's a real crossroads opportunity to put it behind you, take care of business, and forget about it, or let it spiral and ruin your season.
There's a reason that I started with Andy Kotelnicki, because I do think the hires that he made this offseason, he being James Franklin, 3 new coordinators, special teams coach came up from Vandy, Tom Allen, former head coach in Indiana, did a great job. He really did. He did a great job. He's not going to get the fanfare that Kotelnicki's going to get, but Andy Kotelnicki is one of the more talented offensive minds in the game. I'm going to go on record and say I think within 2 years, Andy Kotelnicki's a head coach, and he has saved James Franklin's job.
Yep.
And don't be surprised if the Kotelnicki creativity, again, that game in Happy Valley against Ohio State is the $30 million roster on down the line, but I'm telling you, Kotelnicki can create problems. We're going to get into some of those problems that he presents. And right out of the gates, he was creating issues. And I'm going to kind of close the opening segment with this, because I do want at least some element of a silver lining on this. Nobody is going to pretend we played a respectable brand of football or anything close to it. It wasn't even a facsimile thereof. It was an ugly brand of football, and you're going to get beat 10 times out of 10 when you play as sloppy as we did. There was a time back in 2018. This was Neil Brown's final season at Troy. They were coming off a 10-win season in 2017. They returned 15 starters. They had, matter of fact, there was quite a bit of buzz actually. They entered 2018 with the nation's 4th longest winning streak, a battle-tested team with some buzz around it, entering the season with high hopes and buzz. So in that 2018 opener, they hosted a ranked Boise team. This veteran Troy team hosted a ranked Boise team. They didn't deliver. They played a sloppy brand of football. They turned the ball over 4 times, and they got run out of Troy at home by Boise 56-20 in that opener. 2 weeks later, Troy went in Lincoln, Nebraska, and upset the Cornhuskers. Troy rebounded from that 56-20 decimation to win 10 of its next 12. Now, no 2 teams are ever created equally, right? But I'm only pointing out that not only do these types of things happen, Neil Brown's been through this type of thing before, trying to find a way to rebound from a profoundly disappointing season opener that was a great opportunity for a team that had some buzz. We've lost openers with Neil Brown before, but those teams didn't have buzz. This team had a little bit of buzz. Now it's called into question, is that buzz even warranted? Well, you're about to find out in the weeks to come. This team has the opportunity to rebound or not and show you, because quite frankly, you find a way to convincingly win the next 2, we have a bit of a different taste in our mouths.
No doubt.
And then you kind of go from there into league play. But right now, all we had to show for our efforts is an abysmal 0-1 start and a loss that everyone wants to forget about as quickly as you can, because that was ugly.
Well, we will put the final bow on dissecting it and then burning the tape and forgetting about it and throwing it away when we return on the other side. A thank you to our guy JR and everybody at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Big shout out to everybody there at Team Toothman. Some questions lingering around, some specifics from that game. Jed will break it all down for us more on what the coordinators for the Nittany Lions were able to do, the success that they had, how the Mountaineers might respond. We'll get to all of that when we return on the other side. You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
ITG will return after these messages.
Connects with Cole Taylor. Taylor dives to the end zone. Touchdown, West Virginia. 43 yards.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Get 0% financing for up to 84 months with approved credit on select Coyote tractors in stock now at Johnston Equipment, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we roll along on this Penn State recap. And Jed, I kind of mentioned it in the start there, but you know, when you're an underdog, when you're playing a better team, however you want to label it, you got to be buttoned up. You can't make mistakes. You can't shoot yourself in the foot. You can't take penalties, turnovers, all those things. And it's certainly, I mean, I think that might be as basic as where it starts for the Mountaineers. They did not play clean football at home Saturday afternoon.
Oh, and the officiating crew, unfortunately, had about as sloppier performance as we did. It wasn't one-sided.
Sure
it went both ways. It absolutely went both ways. They didn't decide this football game by any means. And you know, the irony of this is, you kind of always felt if you're the less talented underdog in a matchup, then you'll take all the variables that anybody will throw your way. Well, I can't imagine a game with more variables than the weather delay, sitting in the locker room for a 2-hour halftime. That was, by the way, my 5th weather delay game now. That tells me I've done this for way too long, I think. But that's a crazy variable. That knocks everybody off kilter. That's something that the heavy, more talented favorite doesn't want. And for that matter, an unpredictable performance by the officials. That's something the heavy favorite doesn't want. So let's get into a little bit of this. I broke this down into categories. First, let's hit on some calls, or in some cases, non-calls that hurt WVU, because then I'll get into some of the calls that were non-calls that favored WVU. So here's some of the ones that hurt us. Obviously, the questionable spot on the 4th and 1 sneak by Garrett at the 16, the one that did go our way. Ironically, the one that didn't almost felt like he should have got it.
100%. They should have been flip-flopped.
Yeah. So that one felt like it should have gone our way, and it didn't. So it gives Penn State possession right there on the 15, 16-yard line. I don't know if you could see this at home, but right in front of our bench, and it wasn't the only time this happened, they had that critical 4th down conversion when Drew Aller hit Warren, and the next play was the Katron Allen touchdown on the check down, the option route. Well, on the 4th down conversion, their right tackle clearly jumped. Clearly. I mean, he went into his kick step half a beat before that ball was snapped. That line judge is right next to me. I have no idea how he missed it, but he didn't call it. They go on to convert the next play to 20-yard touchdown. And then, of course, the big one that everybody's going to talk about, the non-offensive pass interference.
Yeah, good Lord.
On the 55-yard gain right before the half to Amari Evans when he pushed off Aubrey. Now, first of all, I have to give a hats off to the Penn State staff. And once again, the creativity of Kotelnicki. I mean, what they did was they took advantage of a situation which, by and large, since Moby Dick was a guppy, you take a knee and take it into the half under those circumstances. The field position, the timing. I mean, I thought for certain there was no way they would gamble, right? And the next thing you know, they find us in cover one. They got a quarterback who can chuck it 60 plus yards off his back foot. They take a chance and they get away with a nudge and they get a 55-yard gain to set up an opportunity in the final seconds of the half. The officials go from 8 seconds to put 2 seconds back on the clock. All of a sudden, there's 10 seconds. So now you can easily take a shot to the end zone without any concerns. They do so. And then another questionable call. The Penn State fans will say, oh, no, he absolutely had his toes down. While as a lot of other folks will say, I'm not so sure he had his toes down with the ball secure. It did look like he bobbled it when he landed on his butt. But, I mean, the TV crew at least agreed. You heard Joe Klatt arguing after I watched the replay that should have been an offensive pass interference. But here's the disappointment I have. Okay, now the strike zone's been defined. If in fact that's the type of game the officials are going to call or not call. If I'm West Virginia's receivers, you know what I'm doing now? Oh, that's the deal. I'm coming out in the second half, and I am giving you the most physical brand of football you've ever seen and daring the officials to call an offensive pass interference. I'm going to be so physical. I'm going to push the envelope so far and get open so many times that they almost have to flag me for OPI. We didn't do that. Once you know the strike zone, play to the strike zone. We should have capitalized on that. We should have seized on that. Obviously, this was a crew that was going to let you play a little tug of war on the back end. Well, if you're a receiver, you have to see that, read the room, and take advantage of it and be far more physical and do some nudging of your own to help your quarterback out. I didn't see us doing that. So that was what was frustrating. Now let's bounce to the other side, the calls or non-calls that favored West Virginia. We already talked about one, the favorable spot on the fourth down.
Yeah.
That did help us stay alive and move the sticks.
I didn't understand that.
I didn't understand it at all. I mean, the targeting call that was waved off on Trey Lathan, I felt like we kind of got lucky because it was almost like he missed what he was trying to hit.
Agreed.
With his helmet. That kind of felt lucky. So
he's got
I tell you what, had they called targeting, I'm not so sure I could have criticized it.
Same.
I felt slightly lucky after that. You probably didn't even see this on the TV copy. I didn't notice until I was watching the coach's copy and the actual game tape. But Tyron Bradley, he had a nasty face mask on Katron Allen. I mean, yanked it back clearly. But it was in traffic. It was the point of attack right there in the scrum at the line of scrimmage. So we got away with that. But by and large, yes, you're going to remember the 55-yard catch and the non-offensive pass interference that Amari Evans got away with. You shouldn't. West Virginia should have taken advantage of that in the second half and played a more physical brand of football itself for its receivers on the perimeter. We didn't. And overall, I mean, we went into this game complaining that last year Penn State and Happy Valley only had one flag for 5 yards.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
How many penalties did West Virginia have Saturday? One flag for 5 yards.
For 5 yards, yep.
Penn State had 8 for 60. So put to bed any possibility that the officials, at least in a unilateral fashion, impacted the outcome of this football game. It was sloppy. It was rough around the edges, but it went both ways. So we benefited from some. Other ones we obviously didn't. What were your thoughts on what was your thoughts on the officiating, Wes?
Completely agree. I mean, in the moment when I'm sitting there in my seat at halftime, I mean, I was apoplectic over that non-OPI call. It was terrible. It actually, I mean, that's right where we sit. I mean, I could have reached out and caught that ball almost myself. I mean, that's right where we sit. It was terrible. Everyone around us is losing their minds. We had probably the most Penn State people around us, right? Because it's right by where the band is for Penn State. So some of their people who would, scalp tickets were trying to be around that area. All the Penn State people around us were like doing the hand above their eyes, like oh man, we got away with that one there. But over the course of 60 minutes, like you said, when I was walking out to my car after the game was over, there was no part of me that thought that the officials had a significant outcome on that game. They made some really bad calls in our favor. They made some really bad calls against us. It all, I think, shook out in the wash, as my mom would say. And yeah, certainly not the reason why Penn State won. Certainly not the reason why WVU lost. I think you did a good job of summing that all up.
Yeah, I think that it almost felt like we always say that college football could stand to gain so much from having 1 or 2 preseason games, inter-squad scrimmages, glorified scrimmages, kind of like the NFL does with their exhibition games. and you could polish some things up. Well, that goes for the officials too. Yes,
No
the
doubt,
first
no doubt.
officials work these scrimmages within the program, but I think they could use few extra reps in August as well. So
Yeah, it's a very good point.
because that was a very rough around the edges performance by the
that's a good
officials.
point.
But okay, let's jump into
And just real quick,
the
Jed,
West Virginia offense. Go ahead.
before
You
you
gotta
jump
read.
before you jump into the offense, thanks to our friends at Fortis, our guy Rick Lewis for being a presenting sponsor of In the Gun for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com. All right, Jed, go ahead and jump, baby.
Okay, there's a lot of good, or there's a lot of bad, some good. But when we did our offensive preview in August to get things rolling, we broke down both sides of the ball. I don't even remember what I started off, my first remarks of the offensive preview. But what I talked about, what made us special last year, before you get into the bells and whistles and the shiny objects and the 30-plus yard plays, we excelled in two critical areas: ball security and staying on schedule. We protected the football, and we didn't suffer a lot of negative yardage plays. Well, both those things went out the window against Penn State. On Saturday, 50% of West Virginia's third downs, talk about being off schedule, 50% of our third downs, 7 out of 14, were third and long, 7 yards or longer. Now, that's 50%. Obviously, that's an issue. Last year, we were only 39%. That was the best in the Big 12. Nobody did a better job of us than staying on schedule. When you get into third and long, it creates a host of problems. It limits your options. You have to keep resources in to help in pass protection, so you can't get as exotic and pushing the football downfield. Now, this is probably a good time to also mention against two NFL edge rushers, when we had an issue with our NFL first round left tackle having to sit out the first half and having his number 2 play behind him for the duration of those 30 minutes. We went against these two NFL edge rushers, and Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton. Each of them had 1 total tackle, no negative yardage plays. So the plan that we had in place, a combination of Nick Malone at right tackle, Big John at left tackle, Wyatt in the first half at left tackle. And speaking of Wyatt Milam, I got to say, guys, the weather down at field level was wretched. I mean, that was going to test anybody, especially someone the size of Wyatt Milam. He was having full body cramps, and I saw him at one point in the second quarter during a TV timeout before the ball was being snapped and the O-line was getting lined up. And I just saw Wyatt standing there. I'm not sure how he was standing. I mean, he was absolutely soaked. He didn't look good. But there's a reason he didn't finish that football game. And so best of luck to him and hydrating for the next handful of days, because those conditions really impact a big man, and they did. But we did a good job with our plan, with our strategy, combination of chipping with our backs, attaching some tight ends to help against those NFL edge guys. So by and large, Penn State defensively did a lot of things to impact this football game, but we at least mitigated the damage done by those two exceptional players in Carter and Dennis Sutton. So I will say that we had these issues early in the football game from a snap and timing issue. That wasn't Brandon Yates. That was a timing issue. Garrett's going to take full responsibility for that. That's all on the quarterback. It's incumbent upon the quarterback, when you run so much movement and so much shifting, you have to be the one, the maestro, who was in charge of snapping the football at the appropriate time. He did not do that with Jaden Bray. That's why the football ricocheted off Jaden Bray. That's why we lost the yards that we did and turned the ball right back over to Penn State after our defense forced the fumble. So what that did was it had an impact and kind of knocked us out of our game plan, and we went a little more vanilla because we didn't want to take any more of those types of risks from a reset standpoint for a while in the game. So that had an impact on things. Now, when I look at what Garrett was trying to do when he did throw the football, our game is to run the football and push the football vertical, right? Now, a year ago, when we pushed the football vertical, by vertical, I mean 20-plus yards downfield, nobody did it more often. Nobody did it more accurately than Garrett Green in the Big 12. He had 46% of his throws last year of 20-plus yards. Now, part of that is because we were so effectively running the football, you could do that on early downs off play action.
Sure.
That's a much easier road to hoe than third and long trying to do it. And all of a sudden, you're seeing exotic looks from Tom Allen at Penn State defense. They're dropping extra numbers into coverage, or sometimes they're disguising a blitz and bringing it your way. So On Saturday, we struggled mightily to recapture some of that downfield magic. Garrett was only 1 of 6, 20-plus yards downfield. Now, there were some things that could have happened that didn't. First play of the game, Traylon Ray, that would have been a 30-yard gain if he found a way to make a decent catch, what would have been a somewhat exceptional catch, because Jalen Reed was just a defensive force for the Nittany Lions. He's what they call their lion safety in this Tom Allen 4-2-5 defense, that hybrid safety that's kind of our spear that floats a little bit of everywhere. And he truly was all over the field, but he's the one that reacted in time to disrupt that thing. But had Traylon made that catch, that's a 30-yard gain. That could have changed the complexion of our pass game. The one that was dislodged once again by Jalen Reed, that almost looked like a fumble to Cole Taylor. I'm sure Cole would like to have that one back. That was a 15-yard gain. Instead, it's incomplete. And then you had one later in the game to Jaden Bray. He's going up the hash. That would have been a 25-yard gain. So these are the types of things that when your quarterback is struggling against a superior defense, you have to make these types of plays to help him out. When he's trying to stack pennies, don't come in and kick that stack over. I mean, you got to at least try and come in and do what you can to pitch in. And that didn't happen. But so Garrett was forced to work his underneath game a lot more than he did last year. And we couldn't find any rhythm. We couldn't get in sync. And Penn State was rallying to the football, tackling in space, doing an exceptional job. I mean, they are, once again, as advertised. Now, I wouldn't say, and Neil talked about this in his presser, that necessarily pushed us around at the point of attack. I mean, we did some decent things in the run game, but the numbers were skewed by those negative yardage plays. I mean, first of all, we weren't getting tremendous push 19 times, which was 54% of our rush attempts. Penn State hit us at the line of scrimmage. That's way above what we're used to. And we weren't doing a good enough job with yards after contact once that was happening. But listen to the yards lost. We ran for 37. If you look at it on paper, 37 rush attempts for 85 yards. We lost 19 yards. This was a very self-inflicted wound on the snap, mistime snap we talked about that ricocheted off Jaden Bray. That's a 19-yard team rushing loss. We lost 11 yards on the hot snap to Garrett. That is an 11-yard team rushing loss. Right there, 30 plays working against our team rushing total that are just miscues on our part. Nothing Penn State really did. Now, the couple sacks by Penn State, that also hurts your rushing total, but that's something that Penn State did induce. We had 52 negative rush yards in this football game. Now, to give you some perspective or frame of reference, we never had a game last year in which we had more than 30 in a game. Wes, we only had 198 negative rushing yards all season. In other words, 15 yards a game was our average. In this Penn State game, 52 negative rush yards, 52 yards getting knocked backwards, which we never did last year, in addition to the 3 turnovers, which we didn't do last year. So those are the types of things that catch up to you. And the receivers, when they were making plays, they weren't doing it necessarily in space and making people miss. They only had 20 yards after contact as a group. That was the second fewest in the Big 12. Now, the rest of the Big 12, obviously, in the opening weekend slate wasn't playing Penn State. But you have to do something to help your quarterback out a little more than you did. And also, there were plenty of times on tape and man coverage, you just didn't see the receivers doing the simple things like running off the defender in man coverage, and Neil said in his presser, that was a difference in 30 to 50 yards in rushing total. And it absolutely was. I mean, one of those 12-yard runs by Jaheim, that could have been a 25-yard run. If you just run your defender off, spend that little bit of extra energy. And I'm going to close on the offensive side with this, Wes, and see what you have to say. A lot of people have asked me about the logics and the metric behind the 2-point conversion. I mean, again, I'm a football nerd. This is kind of my thing. Sure, as soon as it happened, I knew why they were doing it. Okay. I was explaining to the crew upstairs during the TV timeout why we went for 2. It was 20. Think of the score. It was 27-12 at the time. Okay. All the metrics do. They help you plan ahead. Okay. So you're trying, in this case, and Neil mentioned in his presser, he didn't walk you through all this, but he mentioned, well, you're trying to stay ahead of things in case they score again. Well, here's what he meant by that. It's 27-12. If you kick the extra point, it's 27-13. It's a 2-possession game. If you go for 2 and make it, it's 27-14. It's a 2-possession game. If you go for 2 and miss it, it's 27-12. It's still a 2-possession game. But if you go for 2 and make it, it's 27-14, a 2-possession game. Now, if Penn State drives down and kicks a field goal, it's 30-14, and it's still a 2-possession game. That's why you're doing it. And I couldn't help but notice that had we made it, it would have been 27-14, but we missed it. Well, guess what happened right after the kickoff? 2 plays later, Penn State was in field goal range. And I was already thinking, oh, I wish we had that 2-point conversion just in case we can hold them to a field goal. So it's still a 2-possession game. So there's your answer. That's why we went for 2. If you can make it 27-14, you can still you have the insurance of them scoring a field goal. You don't have to pitch a shutout the rest of the way, and you can keep it a 2-possession game. So that's why we did that. And again, Penn State, 2 plays after the ensuing kickoff was right bang bang in field goal range. So that's the answer to why the metrics would say, and that's the decision that Neil makes earlier in the week. He's not doing that in crunch time right as it happens.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, that's something.
that's
you
something
decide.
cooler heads to prevail, and
you decide that philosophically ahead of time. Yeah,
they have a metrics meeting on I think Thursday, and they game out all these scenarios. With a cup of coffee in your hand and cool, calm, and collected, and making the best decisions possible. And you can always tweak those things, but by and large, you want those decisions made earlier in the week. And so that's the answer to the metrics and the 2-point conversion.
Well, on the offense, before we spin the block back here, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Garrett Green and how he did not play his best, and he knows that. I'm sure he'll say that. Everybody knows that. That kid is a lead, of the story in a lot of ways. But I think you touched on this rightfully so. He didn't get the most help either. Some of the things that went wrong, like you mentioned, the turnovers, you mentioned the negativity from the run game. I think those are one-offs, right? I think the big enough sample size from last year. I think the remaining 11 games, huge sample size still to go this year. That will prove to be, again, a one-off first game, really good opponent, jitters, all that different stuff. What concerns me is some of the not helping Garrett Green out that we saw last year, that it's only one game, it's only 60 minutes, but that happened again. First play of the game, you touched on with Traylon Ray. Hey, it would have been a great catch, but you got to make those sometimes. Cole Taylor, it would have been a nice catch to hold on to that after getting blasted, but you got to make those catches sometimes. Jaden Bray had a drop. Preston Fox had a drop. And again, they're not clear-cut. The guy's standing open and hits him in the hand and he drops it. They weren't perfect throws. They had somebody breathing on their neck. But if you want to win games like that, and if you want to make it to a Big 12 championship and win that, certainly, you got to have those. And too many times last year we didn't have those, and certainly Saturday against Penn State, we didn't have those. That worries me because, again, a lot of that other stuff I think is a one-off. That is something that dates back to last year that can't continue. We talked about that when you did your Garrett Green, the passer preview, right? And you talked about the data, the numbers, the story behind that 53% completion percentage last year and how that could easily improve. One of those things that you touched on was we had too many drops last year. And if instead, if you're squeezing the Charmin once or twice more a game, that's one of those things that you do to start making a difference. Again, 11 games going forward. I'm not trying to put a referendum on that group after 60 minutes, but that's something that's going to have to improve if we want the offense to improve and be what it should be.
I would distill it down to this and be my closing remark on the offense. Go back to the Traylon Ray on the first play of the game. When that ball was in flight, again, Jalen Reed is an NFL safety.
No doubt.
I mean, he's a special football player for Penn State.
Doubt.
When that ball was in flight, somebody was going to make a very special play. It turned out Jalen Reed made a very special play. Had Traylon Ray been the one making that very special play, he would have disrupted that PBU and found a way to out-physical Jalen Reed and come down with that football. So in that particular instance, with a special play on the table, somebody's about to make one. Is it mano a mano? Is it you or is it me? Jalen Reed is the one who made the special play.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Not an easy catch, a special catch, but Jalen Reed made a special play.
And too many times that's what happened, right? When it was 50-50, one guy's going to make the play. It was the guy in white who was making the play. Another thank you to our friends at Johnston Equipment for being a presenting sponsor of everything we do here at In the Gun. Make sure you're checking out their newest location on Route 33, just outside of Weston. All right, Jed, let's spin the block to the defense. Where you want to start there?
Well, one of the concerns that we had about facing an Andy Kotelnicki offense was what? Third down. Penn State struggled mightily. That's why, in part, they fired Mike Yurcich. Mike Yurcich was Penn State, I should say, coached by Mike Yurcich offensively, was 5 of 29 on third down in those two losses to Michigan and Ohio State. So I'm quite certain that was top of mind for James Franklin, and all the things he was looking at, the abundance of big plays. They're already starting to see the big plays, Wes. Okay, we'll get back to the third downs here, but Penn State had 2 rushes last year of 40+ yards. That's how many they had Saturday.
Yep.
They had as many Saturday as they had last year. They had 8 plays last year, 40+ yards, and they had 4 on Saturday. This is what Andy Kotelnicki does. He presents things in such a way. Of course, he goes to the Dairy Queen Blizzard thing. He always likes to talk about his offense. It's a Dairy Queen Blizzard. It might look all fancy, but at the end of the day, it's just vanilla ice cream with your favorite candy in it. And he's right. It's all about presentation. And what he does, he presents it in so many different ways to out-leverage you, to isolate you. But the third down scared me when Kansas came in and upset us in 2022. For all the things they did offensively with Jalen Daniels, the one that I remembered most is they were 11 of 15 on third down. We could not get them off the field. Now, Saturday, Penn State was 5 of 11 on third down. And you might say, well, that's not great. No. That's 45%. And that is right there, toe in the door of winning football. When you hit 45%, that's winning football. We've talked about this number this summer with all the numbers I've run when Neil Brown has coached at West Virginia. Our record now, when the opposition converts 45% or more, that's the cutoff. You look at your media kit, it says 45+%. That's the cutoff. That's the sweet spot. We are now 2 and 15 when the other team converts 45%.
Woo.
Not only was I keep calling him Kansas. I get out of this habit. Or do I? Not only was Penn State 45%, but here's what made it all the more frustrating. We were able to do the hard part, the heavy lift, and knock them off schedule. We were forcing them into third and longs. So let me walk you through this. West Virginia forced Penn State into third and long 7 times in those 11 third down tries. 7 times. They were 3rd and 7 or more. The heavy lift is over. Now just make a play on third and long and get them off the field.
Yep.
Okay? Penn State ran for a first down. On third and long, 3rd and 7 or longer, 3 times in 5 tries. They had 5 conversions all day, Wes. 3 of their 5 conversions were rushes on 3rd and 7 or longer, all by their quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That was the most frustrating part.
And their quarterbacks ain't Pat White or Johnny Manziel,
well,
all right?
What's the one number? The one number that Skylar and I talked about in the Phil Steele episode last week, I gave a very surprising number that nobody could believe on Friday in the Phil Steele episode. I pointed out, and Skylar and I even did an over-under on this. Drew Aller last year on third down ran the football for a first down 12 times. Garrett Green only did it 11. Yes. So we had a little over-under the day before the game talking about this very thing, okay? So West Virginia, to give you some perspective, last year allowed opponents to convert on just 19% of their third and long rushes. Penn State did it 60% of the time.
Yeah.
Last year, West Virginia held the opposition. If you ran the ball on 3rd and 7 or longer, only 19% of the time did you move the sticks. Penn State did it 3 times in 5 tries. But once again, we go back to the Kotelnicki effect. Kansas last year under Andy Kotelnicki was not just the most effective and efficient offensive team in the Big 12 on 3rd and short. They were also the most effective and efficient third down offensive team on 3rd and long. Yep. He finds ways to do this. Like in particular, I remember the one time we had both our bandits on the field at once. We're calling them Spurs now. We had Tyron Bradley and Ty French on the field, each basically outside the shoulder of the tackle. We folded or collapsed the pocket. So again, we did the hard part, but we left an area for him to step up, and Aller finds a way to get on the move, and make the sticks, all the while setting up big plays. We talked about it, 4 plays of 40-plus yards. West Virginia last year allowed 12 plays of 40-plus yards all year. We allowed 4 against Penn State. That is, in large measure, the Andy Kotelnicki effect. Now, when you look at our personnel, there are some promising signs. Jeremiah Trotter, we talked about it. Jeremiah Trotter, Josiah Trotter. Okay, how many times am I going to do it? Trotter.
Jeremiah's son.
Jeremiah's son. Josiah Trotter is going to be absolutely special. He's so aggressive that sometimes
if that's his starting point, watch out.
Yeah, he's so aggressive that right now that's the only thing that works against him. Like, you heard Neil mention this. I wish we had a grease board, we could draw it up for you. Sometimes he's so aggressive that when Penn State would run the outside zone, he would overrun the gap, and you could almost see it coming. I mean, your biggest fear, you've heard Owen talk about it on here so many times. You bounce it, you bang it, or you bend it. When you bend it back inside, if the flow is too far to the outside, much like sometimes our backers were, they're going to bend it back inside of the double team and find a seam, and that's exactly what Singleton was doing on those big plays. But he is going to be special. He's already special. It's just a matter of refining and polishing those smaller parts of his game. TJ Jackson, what stood out when I was watching the tape, yes, as advertised, nice addition to the defensive line. He has twitch, he has burst. They were moving him across the defensive line in different spots, and Penn State's offensive line at large was kind of struggling with his quickness. Not bad way to start your Mountaineer career. That was actually his first play on the field when he recovered that fumble. I didn't notice that until I watched the game tape, but that was his first snap in the game when he recovered the Penn State fumble. So hope to see more out of him. West Virginia defensively, we allowed 128 yards after contact. That was in week 1, the most allowed by a Big 12 defense. But again, we're the only team in the Big 12 playing Penn State. We're the only team in the Big 12 facing Singleton and Katron Allen. And but so you have to be more effective in that area. Let's talk quickly about Rodney Gallagher. He did, in fact, quietly play both ways. Not a lot of hype or buzz around that. 8 of his snaps were on the offensive side. He actually had more snaps on the defensive side. He had 11. He made a diving tackle in the flat in front of the Penn State bench, and actually a pretty physical tackle. It was all shoulder. He didn't really wrap. You can tell he's an offensive guy. He's a physical offensive guy, but it wasn't exactly a form tackle. And then when Katron Allen caught the option route and scored from 20 yards out, Gallagher was around that play, but that wasn't really his tackle to make. But yeah, he found himself around the football, and as he refines his game on that side of the football, I think he's going to be an asset for us. Jaheim Joseph, that's one of the things that as you're making notes when you're watching tape, number 3 kept jumping out.
Yeah.
Number 3 kept jumping out. His physicality, his aggressiveness, his burst. He was flying into his run fits. He was creating some problems for Penn State. So I would fully expect us to see even more of him than we already have. And then, there were times that, and this is one of those things when I look at it, that I look at what PFF said from a grade standpoint, and there are always a handful of those, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Do you even watch film? I mean, I hope if you're using PFF grades, you're also watching film to corroborate it, because Malba is one of those guys that definitely played better than he didn't play his best game by any stretch, but there were times that he gave Penn State some problems, and he played way above his PFF grade. I'll promise you that. And I think Jaheim Joseph kind of did as well. So those are a couple guys on the defensive side of the football that I think are going to earn their way for more. To be determined with our corners. I have high hopes for both Aiden Garnes and Garnett Hollis. I have high hopes for that safety room, but to be determined. I mean, it's going to be a week-to-week situation. I don't question their physicality. It all starts with that. I don't question their burst and their skill set and their ability to play in space. I did see Aiden Garnes make some things happen in space that kind of made Drew Aller look the other way. So I think that the possibilities are there. We need to see how things shake out with this defensive line. I have the snap counts in front of me, Wes. And when you look on the defensive side of the football, Garnett Hollis led all defenders with 62 snaps in the game. Oh, that's right. Anthony Wilson once again, we've always said what a physical tackler he was. He was that last year, but there were a couple times he looked a little better in space, holding his own somewhat
I thought
in
he was
pass
solid.
defense.
Yeah.
And Trey Lathan at 48. But if you want to get down to the defensive line, Eddie V led all D linemen with 38 snaps, as tied right there with Sean Martin. So if you want to get a sense of what the rotation looked like, TJ Jackson was at 29, Asani was at 26, Vitorma was at 26, Hammond Russell at 24. So those were the main figures contributing to that rotation of what looked like half a dozen. And then toward the end of the game, Derek Burlitz got in as a battle-tested veteran, for some duty when the game was decided. He had a handful of snaps, but the freshmen, a lot of these freshmen will play in this upcoming game this week.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I think with some of these positions, defensive line and otherwise, it will be determined if they're going to play more than beyond this week or what their 4 games might be for their red shirt. So, these are the types of things I like to look at. But bouncing back with one final thing to the offensive side, we talked with the offensive line hoping to find some depth, right? I mean, that's one of the things that you wanted to do was find some depth. Well, Wyatt Milam, 44 snaps in the first half, didn't play at all in the second half. He bowed out to Johnny Williams. Johnny Williams played the entire second half. And Wes, you can't really quantify the price of gold what an entire half of reps are worth for a guy like Johnny Williams against Donnie Dennis Sutton and against Abdul Carter and against that Penn State defense. I mean,
yeah, no doubt.
That's worth 10 FCS games, right? What he saw playing an entire half against Penn State. So will he be, in fact, that swing man? Xavier Bosley got in for a handful of snaps in the game, but we've talked about we need a 6 and a 7 and maybe even an 8 like we had last year. Well, hats off to Johnny Williams for the most part, holding his own.
Yeah.
Again, it's not like we became a sieve off that left edge
right.
For these Penn State pass rushers once Wyatt stepped out. No, for the most part, when you watch the tape and scrutinize it, Big Johnny, he kind of held his own. There were some lapses, and Penn State maybe didn't make the most of those lapses, but he played a decent brand of football, and that was incredibly good experience for him.
I think you're absolutely right. I thought he certainly held his own against probably the stiffest competition he'll face all season. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good summation of all of it there, Signal Caller. It's tough to find something to add. So here's the last thing I got for you. And I should say, we'll later this week, we'll have a full Albany preview. We'll have Phil Steele Friday again as well. On our Albany preview, we're going to deep dive into everything that happened on the McAfee show with Big O and that chaos on Friday. We'll get all the stories from Big O, all the behind the scenes, all the funny tales. But I'll tell you this, Jed. I mean, that's as I've had some time to calm down about the football game, the 60 minutes that transpired on Saturday. We won Friday. And in a lot of ways won the weekend, and that means something. It doesn't mean as much as if you go out there and win, certainly. It's harder to see that forest through the trees when you have the performance like you had on Saturday. But don't also doubt how big Friday was for our university, how big Saturday was for our university, everything that transpired there at Life Sciences, Deuce McBride hitting that shot for tuition, all those different things. The just impressions that Friday and Saturday morning was for our university, for our image, for our school, for our programs was massive. You cannot quantify that. So to everybody that was, whether it was Big Noon Kickoff, whether it was McAfee, the people that were there early, the people that were out in the sun, the people that flew in from out of town, drove in hours away, whatever the case may be, tip of the cap to everybody that was involved, because while it might not have gone the way we wanted to on the field, obviously, I think everybody did their part. And I think still a very solid weekend for the exposure of the program, all over the place, starting Friday afternoon all the way through Saturday. So I don't want that to be lost as well too.
I agree. You wanted to cap it off with the ultimate cherry on top.
No doubt.
But of course it would have been one for the ages. Again, Penn State, the last thing we want to say is, man, they're not really as good as we thought. No. I actually think they're a little better.
Better than
we thought. I really think they're a little – Andy Kotelnicki, I believe, makes them a little better than we thought.
Agreed.
But that doesn't mean they weren't there for the taking. with that Mountaineer Field crowd at its absolute best to kick things off Saturday afternoon for a noon kickoff. And had we just played a decent brand of football, but it's over. It's behind us. The beauty of football is you have another one a week away. Now let's bounce back and take care of business, and not just against Albany, but moving forward. And look, you can get fun, you can get creative with all the possibilities of what's still on the table, but I don't feel comfortable at all doing that. It feels out of sorts and out of place to do that until you win a football game. And we're still sitting here winless. And
completely agree.
And I don't feel it's appropriate to talk about what we might or might not be, or what we can aspire to or still hope for until we win a football game. And we're sitting here winless, so I'm not going to do that.
Completely agree. I think that's a good way to end it. And all I'll say is, in what? The next 11 days, you got 2 football games in the next 11 days, 12 days. Take care of business in those. We'll be putting Labor Day weekend behind us pretty quickly, I think, and looking ahead to the opportunity that lies with the Big 12 slate.
Like this, Wes. Take care of business in those, and there's a pretty good chance you have a ranked Kansas team coming to Morgantown the week after that.
And then maybe you get to go ranked to Stillwater. You go ranked team to Stillwater on the road the following week. So a lot of, like we said, Jed, you might not have been ready for the big time on Saturday. That's the bummer. You weren't ready for the big time on Saturday, but if you take care of business here in the next 11 days, you're going to have some more opportunities to get back to the big time and to be able to get that taste out of your mouth. And I think that's the task at hand now. Take your lumps, put your head down, get back to work, and take care of business, because then you'll have more opportunities in the big spotlight to go out there and earn a different result. That's how we'll close it down this time. So like I said, a couple days from now, Albany preview, full preview like we always do, along with some great stories from Big O on everything that transpired there with the McAfee show and his reunion with all of his buddies. Phil Steele Friday this week as well, too, as we are now full swing into our season programming here on In the Gun. The one thing that we ask of you before we get out of here is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. He's the signal caller, Jed Drenning. I'm Wes Euler. Big thanks to the beer truck and to our guy Skyler for throwing this together. As always, we'll talk to you here in just a few days. Thanks for listening. Take care. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.